Alright, so yeah, even though our last week is up, I didn't want to leave Wes Craven just yet, so I figured we'd do a little bonus episode of this where we talked about. He has a few TV movies, but I wanted to just kind of single one out, and I decided on Summer of Fear, especially interesting because of the point that it came in his career, where he was basically the kind of one of the top horror names because he had The Hills Have Eyes and Last House on the Left behind him at this point. And so going into that, along with Linda Blair, who was like 5 years off of The Exorcist, they were basically like each one was kind of a selling point for the other, and how this was like his first time actually working with like a real Hollywood actor, and TV movies kind of were on this sort of rise in popularity, and so everything just kind of came together to make this movie happen, and it actually surprisingly fits in well with his filmography, especially dealing in territory that was similar but also a little different as far as what he had done before. Like, the whole witchcraft thing is obviously a new angle for him, but the stranger in the house concept kind of feels like it's a territory he's been in different ways before, but now this is kind of adding a different twist on that sort of thing. And speaking of that concept itself, it is based on a novel by Lois Duncan, and if it's... I haven't read that book, but if it's anything like the other Lois Duncan adaptation that I know, it's probably maybe not close. I don't know. Actually, there's a lot of cases where the movie is actually even called Stranger in Our House, and it was only called Summer of Fear like later on in certain iterations or whatever, and then ultimately in its Blu-ray release, it kept Summer of Fear. So, going on that concept, it's interesting also that when you think about the title Stranger in Our House, there's a lot of moments in this movie that basically tell you the twist, like, right up front, but you don't really notice it at the time, and it's really, well, you can see Craven's abilities and his skill in the genre that you can kind of not see the twist coming even though all the clues are right in front of you. Maybe you do see the twist coming, I don't know, but it kind of snuck up on me in a way that really surprised me. But before we get to the twist itself, looking at the characters here, where we have the cousin Julia who comes in and immediately everybody's enchanted by her, whether it be the older brother Peter, who's played by Jeff East, which is really funny since we just talked about him in Deadly Blessing. Deadly Blessing would come along in a few years, and it makes that reference even funnier when we talked about the marquee at the movie theater, and Deadly Blessing is playing Summer of Fear, apparently. And there's even that, and not even just people in her house, but there's, like, when they're out shopping, that dude that just walks by, that's just like an extra, seems enchanted by her, and it really gives you this vibe of something potentially supernatural surrounding her, but it seems harmless at first, but then as Linda Blair starts to uncover things here, like when she finds the tooth or something like that, or when there's like escalation when it comes to Sundance, how it starts off with him just kind of being put off seemingly by her, and then as it goes on he gets more violent towards her, and then it's like a whole side plot of Sundance just sort of escalating around her. And once that kicks in, there is just a negative energy that you can just sort of feel that kind of surrounds this, and you can sense the supernatural power that she has, and not for good, that's starting to envelop this family. And as it goes on, and we talk about the way things escalate, it's one of those cases where you really learn to just hate a character. So what Lee Purcell, who plays Julia in quotes, brings to this, and just makes her so hateable, but we can also understand how the family feels, enchanted by her at first, and everybody around her feels enchanted by her at first, to where you almost want to take their side over Linda Blair until the movie eventually reaches a point to where we believe it enough that all we want is for them to believe Linda Blair, and it becomes more and more frustrating when nobody does. And in this particular case, it's not just that frustrating thing of, oh, people don't believe it because the script is telling them not to believe it, but the idea that she is a witch and there is some sort of trance over these people that makes them think this Julia is just, the greatest thing ever and perfection and doesn't do anything wrong, which is going to drive Linda Blair's character all the more insane, but also towards this sort of determination to out her for who she really is. And when you look at this through the other characters, we talked about Lee Purcell, there's also Carol Lawrence, who plays the mom, And this is an actress that's coming from like years of stage work and TV. She's the original Maria in West Side Story, like on stage on Broadway, which is insane. And then when you watch these scenes, how where she comes from that background, but then there's this dramatic scene with Linda Blair where she ends up hitting her, and it's like that's a real slap, and those are like real tears in that moment, and you can see where the experience in the acting really comes through and makes these scenes feel really believable, which in a story like this where it's about witches and it's kind of over the top, those moments of believability from the family are going to really play an important part with how we as the audience perceive this. And that's something that the actors and Craven were able to really bring to life in this really surprisingly credible way. There's also the presence of Fran Drescher as her friend. And the thing about it is when I watch movies like this, when Fran Drescher just kind of had these little parts here and there before she blew up as her own character, that sort of nanny character, she is a... There's something about Drescher that's always been more natural than I feel like she ever gets credit for. Where there's moments like even in movies like Spinal Tap, like I actually think she low-key might be the best performance in Spinal Tap. She was always my favorite performance in Spinal Tap. And there's just this natural ability that she has where whenever she comes in and she's playing a scene, even though she's just playing the friend character in this, just even the little interactions between and the little conversations they have that have nothing to do with anything, she just feels like a real person, and that's something that she's been able to bring to parts before she became the sort of nanny character throughout her career that she became known for. And I've always would have loved to have seen her play more parts like this or get more recognition for parts like this, even though it's so small. To me, it always kind of left an impact. I also like the way they treat some characters that you would expect that would be kind of tropes in a movie like this, like the Professor Jarvis, where he's an ally for sure. He becomes like one of the greater allies that she has. But I also love the fact that they play him up like he, even as helpful as he is, and as truthful as he is in what he's learned and found, he's also kind of full of gas in that sort of way, where it's like, when she asks for help and she's talking about how, Julia can make things happen, and he says something like, well, we all make things happen. You dial a number and a phone rings, or something like that, and just as we, the audience, are thinking it, she says, you know what I mean. And it's like, so to actually make him a character that's like truthful and helpful and knows what's going on and knows the dangers of it and what to do to kind of fight it. I also love how they kind of put that sort of, it's almost a bullshit artist quality at first until we learn how helpful he truly is. And I really like the way they sort of played with the character in that sense. There's also the little brother Bobby, and I love the moment where he's kind of there as just sort of the younger character, but there's that one moment in particular that really stands out to me because of how they pull it off. When she says, they're arguing in the bedroom, and then she says, drop dead, Bobby. And he seems to. Now, clearly, this is a case where it's a character playing a prank on a character, and that's something we've seen many times over before. So you would think, oh, it'd be so obvious, but kind of the genius placement of this moment is that it's really late into the movie. The movie's only an hour and a half, and it's like an hour in that this happens. So this moment that is such an obvious sort of horror movie prank character moment is put in so late in the movie, we actually kind of believe it by the time we get to that point, where when he actually drops to the floor, it's like, oh, now because Julia's already done so much at this point, Julia in quotes, has done so much at this point that you actually think, oh, that might have actually just happened. And it lingers on it just long enough for you to actually start to believe it before we realize it's a prank. And so I don't know that I've seen that done so late into a movie's runtime, and how that can actually play a part in making you believe something and get that actual genuine scare out of you, rather than you just realizing it's a prank from very far away. And when you talk about the way Julia kind of merges into the family, I really love this montage in the middle, talking about other things where it seems like they have a different context than any other movie. It's like a whole family montage, and it seems like it's like out of a feel-good movie or something, where it's like, the cousin that came in, and, she doesn't have her own family anymore, and she's slowly starting to blend in with this family and get used to things. And if you did not have any context whatsoever, this would be like a really nice, heartwarming montage. But the fact that we have the context that we do by this point makes it even more eerie by how much they play up that it's like this feel-good moment out of any other like Lifetime movie or Hallmark movie or something. And it's like playing it up just like that with the music and everything. The music is like nice and light, and it's like everything about it says this is good and heartwarming. But like I said, the fact that we already have the context, I love that they played it that straight and that sort of feel good like, because it only makes it creepier that we know that she's integrating herself into this family for all of the scary and sort of supernatural reasons. And talking about also the way it escalates, we were talking about the Sundance stuff. Like, the moment when Sundance eventually has to be killed, and there's that stunt, like that real stunt, where the horse rolls and then like rolls on top of her, and the way it looks so brutal yet also real. Is something that's going to play a big part in this also, where that's something that would have, however they would have done it today, would have looked super fake and not convincing at all. And to my understanding, no horse or person was injured during this stunt. It was pulled off perfectly. But I love that it's all completely in the shot. And then what follows here, where the way Blair plays the devastation of watching Sundance be put down just right then and there, and how they've built up her connection with him already, where there's already been a sense of danger with him, where it's going to start off with, oh, we're going to, keep him somewhere else because he tried to attack Julia or whatever. You already get the sense that that separation is really damaging to her. So for her to actually watch him have to be killed, and kind of knowing by this point that Julia is responsible for it, it's not just the devastation that she plays that's believable enough, but it's a certain kind of childlike devastation also, where she plays it, where it's like it feels authentic one way or the other, but like I said, there's just something childlike about it that makes it even more believable and devastating coming from her character specifically. So the way she plays that, I feel like, is one of those things also that's really grounding this otherwise over-the-top scenario in this, witches, or in this movie kind of thing. But giving it this very grounded feel, just like the family interactions do, and the interactions with, like, Fran Drescher and all that do. Which ultimately brings us to our big climax, which is, I mean, not only is it feels big, especially for a TV movie, where it kind of turns into an action climax almost, and the way that she's able to use her witch powers to make the car stop doing whatever could easily prevent the situation from happening. They can't hit the brakes, they can't open the doors, and the way they use that to just trap the characters. And on top of that also, we were talking about the twist and how obvious it should seem, how they give us all the clues. How, like, the clothes don't fit, and she doesn't like music, even though she's supposed to be in the choir or something. The big one that they tell us right up front is they've never even sent pictures of Julia before. So, like I said, all of it seems so incredibly obvious, but I don't know, I feel like they slip them in pretty seamlessly. Like, when she brings up, they haven't even sent pictures. It's in the middle of a conversation where it would make sense to bring that up. And it makes sense in the context. So, for me, the first time I saw this movie, it's not something I really gave a second thought to. And so the way they were able to kind of sneak in maybe, I assume a lot of people probably saw it coming from a mile away, but surprisingly, it caught me off guard the first time. And like I said, going back and seeing all the obvious clues shows how good Craven is at his job, and also how well the writing was put together. And the way Lee Purcell can sort of play sort of multiple characters, where she is believable as the supposed Julia that's really nice and everybody likes, and then the witch. And how there are moments when she, like, genuinely looks scary. And there's even that moment at the very beginning during the opening credits when we see her face and the car crashes. They give us everything. They tell you what the twist is so many times. And yet somehow it comes in pretty naturally. So, I've always really appreciated how that was pulled off. Like I said, maybe a lot of people thought it was super obvious, but I thought it was really well done as far as the way it unraveled itself, and seemed to gradually get to that point, even while throwing constant clues at us. So, and of course, the clear horror movie ending where we have to have the cliffhanger, where that poor little girl and her mom are obviously going to get swept up in this now, and it's going to be a whole other thing that goes on forever. But I like the way it wraps up with the family that we know throughout the movie. where everything, it kind of does have that happy ending, and I don't know, because I guess because the movie convinced me it could have gotten super dark, like it could have ended with this entire family being killed, and the fact that it convinced me of that well enough actually feels like the happy ending for them anyway is pretty earned. So, but it kind of gives, the best of both worlds, where we have the, oh, but this family's probably fucked, this new one. So, so it still has that dark ending, but can have the happy ending also. And I honestly don't mind that for this. So, that's how I feel about this one. Like I said, I just wanted to throw one more Wes Craven thing out there, because I wasn't sure what to do about some of the TV stuff he's done, and how we didn't touch on, like, every movie he's done. Almost, but not quite. So I think this is going to end the whole Wes Craven thing now, and we can go on to, I think the next thing is going to be another original versus remake versus, and then more stuff like that through the second half of the month now. And we're going to talk about franchise, and a franchise that's maybe gone in multiple directions, which results in multiple videos when we get to the end of the month. So hopefully you like this whole Wes Craven thing and all the other stuff that's come before and is going to come after. So until the next thing, I think that's it.